So this problem is talking about a rug measuring 2 feet by 3 feet. And then Robert is going to add a border with fit for X feet. Then it says the perimeter of the upgraded rug is 14 feet. Determine the width of the new border X. So I know that this distance is X. This distance is 2. And this distance is X. So the new width is 2 plus 2x. What about the new length? So I know this distance is x, this distance is 3, and this distance is also x. So the new width is 3 plus 2x. And so the perimeter would be the distance all the way around. So if I want to go all the way around the new rug, it's going to be 2 of these widths plus 2 of these lengths. So 2 times 3 plus 2x plus 2 times 2 plus 2x. So 2 lengths and 2 widths. If I add that up, I should get 14. And so I can distribute those things. So distribute that 2, and I get 6 plus 4x plus 4 plus 4x equal 14. And so I get 8x is equal to, when I subtract the 6 and the 4 over, I get 4. Divide by 8, x is equal to 1/2 of a foot. Now it says Brian, Mark, and Jeff are painting a house. Working together, they can paint the house in 6 hours. Working alone, Brian can paint the house in 15 hours, and Jeff can paint the house in 20 hours. How long would it take Mark to paint the house working alone? So let's say that Mark can paint the house in X hours. Okay. Okay, and so I know if Brian can paint the house in 15 hours, that means each hour he paints 1/15 of the house. So Brian paints at a rate of 1/15 of the house each hour, and he's going to do that for 20 hours. And then we know Jeff is painting, so Jeff here can paint, working together they paint it in 6 hours, so hang on. So he's going to be doing that for 6 hours. So 1/15 of the house for 6 hours. Jeff here is painting 1/20 of the house per hour for 6 hours. And then Mark is going to paint 1/x of the house for 6 hours, and that should total up to 1 whole house. And so all we need to do is solve for x here. So I'm going to get 6 over x is equal to, if I subtract all of that stuff over, I'm going to get 1 minus 6/15 minus 6/20, and that gives me 3/10. Okay, and then to solve for x, I'm going to multiply both sides by x and multiply both sides by 10. So if I multiply both sides by x, and then I multiply both sides also by 10, what do I have here? I can see that the x over x makes 1, and I can see that the 10 over 10 makes 1, and what I'm left with is 60 is equal to 3x, and then I can divide both sides by 3, I get x equals 20. And 20 is the rate at which, or the number of hours that it would take Mark to paint the house working alone, so it's 20 hours. That's the answer. Number 13 says the property tax on a $180,000 house is $1,296. So we can compute the rate of property tax by dividing. So I can say to compute the property tax, then it says at this rate, what is the property tax on a house that is $240,000? So I can set up a proportion, 1,296 divided by 180,000 is equal to x divided by 240,000. Okay, and then I can solve that for x. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 240,000 and multiply both sides by 180,000. When I do that, I'm going to get 1,296 times 240,000 gives you something huge. So x times 180,000. And so I can divide by 180,000. And I get x is equal to $1,728. So the next problem says to express these in simplest form. And so one thing we ought to realize here is that there's a pattern in the way we compute these powers of I. And so I know what is I. I is equal to the square root of -1. So I squared is equal to the square root of -1 squared, which is -1. And I cubed is equal to a square root of -1 cubed, which is equal to -1 times the square root of -1, which is equal to -I. And I to the fourth is equal to square root of -1 to the fourth, which is -1 squared, which is 1. And then the cycle is going to continue over and over again. So when I simplify this, I can see this I to the 27th is going to be I to the fourth times 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 I to the fourth. How many of those is that? 4, 8, 12, 16, 20 times I to the fourth, 24 times I to the third. That makes 27 i's multiplied together. Each of these I to the fourths is a 1. So 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times I cubed. And we know I cubed is -I. Okay. I to the -14th is going to be 1 over I to the 14th. And I to the 14th is I to the fourth times I to the fourth times I to the fourth times I squared. So 1, 4, 8, 12, 13, 14 i's multiplied together there. Each of those I to the fourths is a 1, and I squared is -1. So it's 1 over -1, which is -1. I to the 104th, well, I know how many, I'll have I to the fourth so many times, and then how many, 104 I can see is divisible by 4, because, so it's going to be I to the fourth, and then how many I to the fourths are we going to have? Well, if I do 104 divided by 4, I have 26 of those. So that's 1 to the 26th, which is 1. I to the 621, well, I can see 621 is not going to be divisible by 4. But 620 is. So it should be I to the 620 times I, but 620 is divisible by 4. 155, so that's I to the fourth to the 155 times I. So that's 1 to the 155 times I, which is just I. Then it says write square root of -6 times square root of -8 in terms of I and simplify. Okay, so square root of -6 times square root of -8. Well, I can write this as square root of -1 times square root of 6 times square root of -1 times square root of 8. And then I can move those together. So this is I times I, so I squared, times the square root of 6 times 8. So 6 times 8 is 48. So, and I squared is negative. So negative square root of 48. And square root of 48 is not a perfect square, but I know that 48 is divisible by 16. 3 times equals negative square root of 16 times 3, and square root of 16 I know is 4, so -4 square roots of 3. Okay. All right, so moving on to the next problem. I want to perform the indicated operations and write the solution in standard form. So I'm going to delete all the this other stuff. And we'll write down what we have over here. Okay. All right, so if I want to perform this indicated operation, I'm adding, so I'm just going to drop the parentheses. So I'll have 6 minus 10i plus 2 plus 6i, and then I'm going to combine like terms. So 6 plus 2 is 8, negative 10i plus 6i is minus 4i. There it is in standard form. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is multiply this out. So I'm going to multiply the 2 across, and then I'll multiply the negative 4i across. So I'm just distributing the 2 over the 3 plus 5i, and then I'll distribute the negative 4i over the 3 plus 5i. So 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 5i is 10i, negative 4i times 3 is negative 12i, and negative 4i times 5i is going to be negative 20i squared. And what is I squared? I squared is square root of negative 1 squared, which is negative 1. And so this gives me 6 plus, let's combine those i's together. So 6 minus 2i, and then plus 20. So this is 26 minus 2i. So for the next one, I want to, I'm just going to distribute that negative across here. So I'll have negative 4 plus 5i minus 2 plus 3i. And so it looks like the 4 minus 2 is negative 6, and the 5i plus 3i is going to be plus 8i. All right, the next one is going to be here. I'll have 8 minus 5i divided by 3 plus 5i. So in order to do this division, I'm going to do a simplification by multiplying by the conjugate of the bottom. And so I can see that the bottom is, the denominator is 3 plus 5i, so I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 3 minus 5i. Okay, and if I do that, I'm going to get, on the bottom, I'll have 3 minus, I'll get 9, 3 times 3 is 9, minus 25i squared. And on top, I can multiply that out, and I'll get 8 times 3 is 24. And then 8 times negative 5i is minus 40i. And then negative 5i times 3 is minus 15i. And then negative 5i times negative 5i is going to be plus 25i squared. And so I'm going to simplify that down, and I'm going to get 9 plus 25 on bottom is 34. And on top, I have 24, and then I'll have minus 25, which is negative 1. And then negative 40i plus negative 15i is negative 55i. And so what I get is negative 1 over 34 minus 55 over 34i. Okay, the very last one I want to solve using the square root property. So what I'm going to do is take the square root of both sides. So I'll have x plus 11 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 40. And then I'm going to add 11 to both sides. So x is equal to 11 plus or minus the square root of 40. And that solves for x.